Congratulations to you if you've just had a new baby, or if your wife has had a new baby, or your sister or your friend, or just someone really close to you has just had a baby. Congratulations to them. One of the things which will be on your mind, or on your wife's mind, or on the mind of this loved one who has just had a baby, now that they are settling into the joys and the aches of having a new baby, would be, when will my periods return? And so today I will be answering the question, when do periods return after delivery? So you sit tight with me. Let's get this question answered. Hello and welcome to Case Corner. My name is Karen, and if you're joining me for the first time, today I am talking about the return of periods after delivery. Today I'll be looking at when your periods will return after you've given birth, how you would know that your periods are likely to return quite soon, what will the periods look like, and most importantly, the chances of becoming pregnant even before the periods come. If this is something which you are interested in, something which you really like to know about, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to the channel. This video is a good one to share. So let's just jump right in. So immediately after delivery, whether it's a vaginal birth or it's a cesarean section, one of the things which you would notice is vaginal bleeding. All right, so women would bleed for some days, and usually that bleeding happens in 3 stages. I'm not going to go into the details of how they are called, but you realize that you would bleed for a number of days, starting immediately after delivery, which will be like a bright red blood, and that bright red blood would last for a number of days, and then it will gradually move into a lightish pink bleeding, not really bright red, just a little bit pinkish, and then it settles into a whitish yellowish discharge. Sometimes it's just a discharge, sometimes it's actually a bleeding, and usually that then leads to complete cessation, so it then stops. And usually for most women, this whole cycle of bleeding and the changes that they see after they give birth will last up to 6 weeks. For some women, perhaps in the 4 weeks, for some women 2 weeks, for some women 5 weeks, but usually by the end of the 6th week, everything has completely stopped. And then what starts going on in the mind of the women is, all right, this was not my period. This was just the things that happened after I gave birth. When will my period actually return? A major factor that influences the return of periods after delivery is breastfeeding. All right, so you choose how you want to feed your baby, whether you want to bottle feed the baby or you want to breastfeed the baby. And even if you choose breastfeeding, you then have to choose whether you would be breastfeeding exclusively or not. But for the women who breastfeed exclusively means that for a period of time which they choose, so whether it's 4 months or it's 6 months or it's 3 months, during that period, they're only breastfeeding their baby. So they're not giving the baby water, they're not giving other foods, it's just breastfeeding. That's exclusive breastfeeding. And actually the recommendation is to take exclusive breastfeeding up until 6 months before you start adding any other thing. All right, so for the women who breastfeed exclusively, usually their periods will not return quite soon. Generally, for the 6 months for which they are breastfeeding, they do not have periods. And if they carry on breastfeeding up to say 1 year and even nearly 2 years, there are chances that their periods will be delayed for that long. The reason is because the hormone that is responsible for making sure that you have breast milk is also responsible for suppressing the return of periods. So as long as you're breastfeeding properly, you're exclusively breastfeeding, for most women, their periods will not return quite quickly. It wouldn't return immediately after delivery, or it will not return while they're exclusively breastfeeding. Now, for some other women who are breastfeeding, but they're doing kind of a mixed feeding, so they're breastfeeding, but they're also giving water, they're breastfeeding, but they're also doing bottle feeding, because you are reducing the amount of, or the number of times the baby is feeding, that means that the production of that hormone is not as much as in the women who are exclusively breastfeeding, the chances that your periods will return is also quite increased. All right. For the women who are completely bottle feeding, or they are completely going on supplements, so any other thing which is not breast milk, for those women, so technically women who choose not to breastfeed, their periods would return almost immediately. So usually within, say, 5 to 6 weeks after they have given birth, there are chances that their periods could return. Right. So generally, breastfeeding or bottle feeding, or the method of feeding, is heavily connected to when your periods will return. Now, it's worth noting that these things differ from one woman to another, but generally, when you exclusively breastfeed, the chances that your periods will return quite quick is quite slim, and when you do not exclusively breastfeed, the chances that your periods will return quickly or will return quite soon is also increased. So you want to look at your options and then look at the fact that it's possible that your periods could come back quite quickly. The literature actually says that for the women who breastfeed, they could go up to a year without periods. And for the women who choose not to breastfeed, in the next 5 to 6 weeks, they could have their periods. The next question is, how will you know that your periods are due to come back soon after delivery? Well, there is no clear way to know. The signs of ovulation are the same before you give birth, so when you're not pregnant, as when you've given birth. So the same things, that you normally experience before you became pregnant will be the same things that you experience after you've given birth. So we're looking at things like the cramps that you have. We're looking at breast engorgement. And again, with breast engorgement, it's a bit tricky because now you've given birth and you're breastfeeding, So the engorgement sometimes is a bit tricky because it may be difficult to tell whether it's engorgement because of breastfeeding or engorgement because of your periods coming back. But obviously there's the cramps. You could have the breakouts that you have there. You could have the vaginal discharge. So all of those things which normally tell you that you're going to ovulate are the same things which you experience. There's a video which I've already made, and I'll link somewhere in the description or somewhere up there for you to know the signs of ovulation. And then you can monitor yourself. And when you see those signs, you can start thinking, start getting ready. Your periods would be around the corner anytime soon. The third question is about the fact that, women just want to know whether the periods will be the same. Would it be the same thing like it used to be before I became pregnant, or will there be changes? Well, usually for quite a lot of women, there are a few changes, really slight. And if you're not really careful or you're not really monitoring quite closely, you wouldn't even make out the difference. But for some women, they just realize that they have more cramps. So they have abdominal cramps a little bit more than usual. And that's generally because, the body is healing after delivery. And then for some women, they have slightly more bleeding. So they bleed a little bit heavier than they used to bleed. And obviously, you're going to know that by the number of parts which you change. Now, because it's been a while since you menstruated or since you had periods, especially if you exclusively breastfed, you might have forgotten what your periods actually look like. So usually after delivery, when your periods start again, you need to take some time to study your periods all over. All right, so women also notice that they have slightly longer periods. And again, like I said, if you exclusively breastfed or you just breastfed and you haven't had periods for about 1 year or maybe 2 years, you will not even realize, or you could just forget what your periods look like in terms of length. So you need to take some time and study your periods again to establish a new baseline for yourself. And then based on that, you can start monitoring your periods. However, when your period starts, anything which is out of the ordinary, please, you need to seek medical advice. So yes, you've forgotten what your periods really look like, but if you start bleeding and you start having clots, really heavy clots, or the cramps become so unbearable, or you're bleeding for 2 weeks, you just know that that's completely out of the ordinary, whether you can remember or not. So please don't stay at home with those. Seek medical help. And the last question of the day is whether you can become pregnant before your period returns after delivery? The short answer to that question is yes. Yes, you can become pregnant before your periods return, and it doesn't matter whether it is 5 weeks after delivery or it is 2 years after delivery. Your body will ovulate before your period returns, whether you're exclusively breastfeeding or not. Whether you choose to breastfeed or you choose not to breastfeed, your body will ovulate. And if you're sexually active or you have sexual intercourse about that time when you're ovulating, obviously before your periods return, there is a chance that you could become pregnant. And again, that could happen 3 weeks after you have given birth or 2 years after you've given birth. So if you are not interested in having another pregnancy, the advice is to seek some birth control methods immediately you become sexually active after pregnancy. Usually the medics advise that you go off sexual activity for about 6 weeks to 8 weeks, just to give your body some time to heal, because otherwise you could find yourself with another pregnancy when you did not really realize that you could get pregnant. So yes, you could get pregnant before the return of your periods after you've given birth. Remember, I said that you need to monitor your periods again after you've given birth so that you can spot anything which is out of the ordinary. I am going to link another video for you somewhere around here or in the description, and that video is going to list some danger signs which you should be watching out for. And in the event that you see any of these signs, please seek medical help. It's really important that you monitor yourself so that you don't stay at home when something is not right. Don't forget to like the video, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to turn on your notification, and don't forget to share this video. Thank you for watching. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next video.